it's interesting, especially in poorer parts of the world, including in poorer parts of the United States, people are skeptical of things that are free.
That's
They
right.
think there must be a catch. And that's the irony here, because affluent families, they have high usage of Khan Academy. They know that it's better than what they could pay for. And then you have poor families that don't fully appreciate that. So we need to, and obviously we're working with anyone who we can to build that awareness. Khan Academy already exists in 50 plus languages to different degrees of fidelity. For example, in Spanish or Brazilian Portuguese or Hindi, it's almost as good as it is in English. And generative AI adds an interesting dimension to this.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So, how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/ionai. That's oracle.com/ionai. Hi, I'm Craig Smith, and this is Eye on AI. In this episode, I talked to Sal Khan, founder and CEO of Khan Academy. We talk about how artificial intelligence and generative AI can transform education. Sal discusses Khan Academy's new AI-powered tutoring tool called Khanmigo, powered by GPT-4, which provides personalized instruction and assistance to students. We talked about the challenges and opportunities of implementing AI in education, including issues around bias, transparency, and cheating. Sal shared his vision for using AI to provide high-quality, personalized education to all students globally, and how it can supplement teachers instead of replacing them. I hope you find the conversation as fascinating as I did.
I'm Sal Khan. I'm the founder and CEO of Khan Academy. We're a not-for-profit with a mission of providing a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere.
And where did you go to school, and how did you start Khan Academy?
Oh, it depends how far you want to go back. Where I went to school. I was born and raised in the New Orleans area. I eventually ended up going doing my undergrad at MIT, and I think that's a little bit connected to. I initially thought I wanted to be an AI researcher back in the day, but I kept falling into these education. I kept gravitating towards education. I end up going and working in tech, not in education, and then I go to business school at Harvard Business School, and then I found myself as an analyst at a hedge fund, and I always used to tell folks when I was at the hedge fund, hey, I'm just going to do this long enough so that one day I could start a school on my own terms and be like the Dumbledore figure. And it was around that time, 2004, I was a year out of business school. I had just gotten married. I had family visiting me from New Orleans. And it just came out of conversation that my 12-year-old cousin Nadia was having trouble in math. I offered to tutor her remotely. She agreed. Long story short, it helped. She got caught up with her class, even a little ahead of her class. At that point, I become what I call a tiger cousin. I called up her school. I said, I really think Nadia Rahman should be able to retake that placement exam from last year. They said, who are you? I said, I'm her cousin. And they let her. And the same Nadia who was put in a remedial track was then put into advanced track. I started tutoring her younger brothers. Word spreads in my family. Free tutoring is going on. Before I know it, I'm tutoring 10, 15 cousins. And I had a day job. I was an analyst at a hedge fund.
Yeah.
And then in it was around 2005 that my background was in software. I said, oh, I see some common patterns with my cousins. They need more practice. They had some gaps in their learning that was keeping them from advancing. So I started writing software for them that would let them practice at their own pace, let me as their teacher or their tutor keep track of what they were doing. and I called it Khan Academy. The domain name was available, and it's kind of my family project. And I did have, even then, slightly delusional aspirations that one day it could turn into a real institution that
Yeah.
could educate a lot of folks. In 2006, a friend suggested I make videos to supplement that software. I initially thought it was a bad idea. I said, that's frivolous. YouTube, you can't do anything serious on that. But then I gave it a shot, and that took on a life of its own. And then by 2009, I frankly had trouble focusing on my day job, and we set up. At the time I set up Khan Academy as a not-for-profit, mission-free, world-class education for anyone, anywhere. Quit my day job. It was a stressful year, but by 2010, we had our first philanthropic support to become a real organization.
Yeah. And you have a bricks and mortar school somewhere, don't you?
Yeah, so this is a sister side project to the core of Khan Academy. I wrote a book in 2012 called The One World Schoolhouse. The first third of the book is how did the education system just get to the way it is today? The middle third of the book was what I just outlined. How did I fall into this and this Khan Academy journey? And the last third of the book was, well, given the tools we now have and what the world likely needs, what could education look like if you think about it from first principles? And ideas of personalization. You don't have to have every student work in lockstep. If you need more time to learn something, great. If you've already learned it, move on. Related to this idea is this notion of, instead of seat time, hey, I need you to sit in a chair and learn a year of algebra, 2 years of algebra. What matters is whether you know it or not. It might take you 2
Right.
weeks, it might take you 2 years. So whether you want to call that competency based versus seat time or mastery learning is a related idea that if you haven't learned it well yet, keep working on it. Like there's no, you should have that opportunity. And there were other ideas. How can you use tools so you can free up more time for human interaction, et cetera, et cetera. One thing to write about all this, whole other thing to implement it. Also, I had a selfish motivation. In 2014, my oldest child, who's now 14, but he was entering kindergarten. And I was already doing the rounds, telling everyone about personalization and mastery and how all of these tools could be used. And I didn't want to be a hypocrite that I'm saying all this stuff, but my own kids aren't experiencing it. And so we started Khan Lab School. It's a different organization than Khan Academy, but I obviously helped start it, and I'm the chair of that school. But the whole idea is Khan Academy is already reaching hundreds of millions and one day billions of folks, and that's great. Hopefully we can have a lot of positive positive impact through that. But it would be a shame if, even though that exists, that we haven't been able to reimagine what schools could look like. And so
Yeah.
the hope is Khan Lab School, it is a K-12 school out here in Silicon Valley. It's only 300 students. But if we can be very transparent and show ways to do it that are, aren't ridiculously resource intensive, that can make a more enriching experience for everyone, so be it. We also have another project. This is a newer one, Khan World School. We started with Arizona State University. We're like, can we scale this idea even further? Have an online high school and now middle school that can embody some of these same principles.
Yeah. How much AI? Well, first of all, what did you study at MIT undergraduate? And then I wanted to ask how much AI is in the platform at this point.
I was a computer science. I majored in computer science and I majored in math. And some of my freshman advisor was Henry Patrick Winston, who's one of the fathers of AI. I took the Marvin Minsky course, who was obviously one of the titans of AI back in the day. In terms of Khan Academy, we've until this last year, we had dabbled a bit in AI to do things like recommendations for the next best activity, et cetera. When OpenAI reached out to us a little over a year ago, this was summer of 2022, and showed us GPT-4, and we were seeing it before anyone else saw this. And this was months before Chat GPT comes out. Chat GPT is not even using GPT-4. It's really just a chat interface on
Right.
GPT-3, GPT 3.5. But that was the first time we said, wow, in a lot of ways, everything that Khan Academy is about is scaling what I was originally doing for my cousins. And this technology bears promise to take it that much further, go that much richer. So, we signed the non-disclosure agreement with OpenAI, and we went heads down to say, all right, is there a way to do this so we can capture the upsides, a tutor for every student, a teaching assistant for every teacher, and also mitigate the downsides, the cheating risk, the bias, the transparency, hallucinations. A lot of these models out the box aren't that good at math. How do we address that? And that's what we've been working on. And we launched in March of 2023, at the same
Mhm.
day that GPT-4 was launched, and it's called Khanmigo. And I think when people use it on Khan Academy, they see that it's dramatically different than what a lot of folks even come to expect from GPT-4. It really has a Socratic tutor element to it. It is surprisingly better at math than a lot of people expect. We've done a lot of work on that. We've done a lot of work to minimize hallucinations, and we have a whole series of guardrails to help protect young people, young learners.
Yeah. And how do you guard against hallucinations, which for me is the real challenge of using LLMs for education? Do you tie it to a vector database, which seems to be the most popular solution?
We do all of the above. We definitely have a vector database, for those who are, that's this whole idea that you can put documents into a form that when
Mhm.
the AI is having a conversation with you, it can say, like, what are documents that are very close in the vector space to this conversation, and then slurp those out, summarize them, and then use those as your fact base. So we're doing that. We put very simple guardrails, like we use the vector database actually for Khanmigo to provide internal links within Khan Academy. But
Mhm.
links are one of those places where if you let it make up links, it'll make up links. So it doesn't provide links outside. It's also in the prompting, it anchors usually on Khan Academy content, either article, video, or exercise. So that also helps minimize things like hallucinations. And then it's at this stage, I think in the next year or two, you're going to see the underlying models get a lot better at both the hallucinations and providing references. But I also think there's just a digital literacy aspect to it, making folks know that, look, if there's something that is being said that you're going to index very heavily on, you have to double check it. And honestly,
Sure.
that's true even before generative AI. That's true even if a
Yeah.
teacher tells you something in a classroom or you read something on the internet.
Yeah. I'm, as I said, particularly interested in AI tutors. So is Khanmigo essentially an AI tutor? I haven't used it. I've talked to people that have. Let me explain what I mean by AI tutor, and you can tell me whether you guys are doing this. So there's this company that I'm familiar with. I've written about in Korea. There's also in Joshua Bengio's one of his students has a company called Corbit. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Korbit out of Montreal. It's an
Mm-hmm.
AI tutor, and both of these guys, these companies, they have a knowledge tracing algorithm that tracks the student knowledge as the student interacts with the system. They have the recommendation engine that then recommends content, video or text or audio, uh, to the student to fill in gaps in the student's knowledge. And then they, which I thought was brilliant, the Korean group has a score prediction algorithms, and so if you're working on, they focus on test prep, but it would work equally in uh, in coursework. It predicts your final score, and if you follow the recommendations that the system's giving you based on the knowledge tracing algorithms, your predicted score goes up until at the end uh, they meet. So you get the score that it says you're going to get, and it's an incentive to follow the recommendations. That to me sounded like a game changer, but I don't see it uh, anywhere in the market. I mean, these guys are having, other than test prep, they're having difficulty getting into schools and that sort of thing. I guess one, does that kind of a system make sense? Is Khan Academy building something similar? And two, why is there such resistance to these solutions, which really do promise personalized education for anyone with an internet connection?
Yeah, what you just described, where a system is intelligently recommending the next best thing for a student to work on based on past performance, and is even able to do some inference and prediction, and even tell, let's say, the student or teachers or parents, hey, and this is a way that you can help also support what's next
Right.
best for the student. In many ways, that is what Khan Academy 1.0 is. That's kind of what we've been working on for over a decade now.
Hmm.
I think what we are now talking about is taking it a step further, which is um, feeding all of that into a, a generative AI model with a lot happening at the application layer where it can converse with you, where it really
Right.
feels like you're, and it can dive in deeper. If you're watching a video, just as if you would ask a teacher a question, you can ask it a question. If you say, why do I need to learn this? And it'll say like, well, what do you care about? And you say, well, I care about this. And it remembers it.
Yeah.
So it's starting to get into almost more of the EQ side of what a great tutor would be. Well, yes, it can help you unblock, it can recommend, but it can also emote. And I know that's a strange thing to say, but it can also empathize. It'll remember interactions. It can have a long form relationship with the user, and also it's connected to the teacher, and there it acts as something of a teaching assistant where it can report back to the teacher or the parent or both what's the student's been up to, what they've been up to, collaborate with the teacher to modify lesson plans, create, even potentially help grading, things like that, so that the teacher feels even the student feels even more supported. I actually have never sensed resistance to these types of things. I
Hmm.
think it's more about traditional ed tech, and I'd put Khan Academy in this category, is you make a tool and you go to a teacher, and we've had hundreds of thousands of teachers use it in classrooms. But if you go to a new teacher who is doing their thing and you say, look, we have the efficacy studies. If students do this, they're accelerating by whatever, 30, 40%. And here's all your tools. Most teachers, when they see that, if they think you're being genuine and the efficacy studies look legit, they're like, oh, this is great. I definitely want to do this. I want to accelerate. But they're already overworked. They already have a million things to do. And now you're expecting them to learn one more tool and
Right.
figure out how to, and space in the classroom and all of that. And so I think that's historically been the hard part. What's interesting about this next wave, especially with generative AI, teachers spend 10, 15 hours a week doing things like lesson planning, grading papers, writing progress reports. Just helping them, having the generative AI help them with that, I
Right.
think we can get that 15 hours down to 1 hour, 2 hours.
Right.
So it's going to create it's going to create less time and energy scarcity for the teacher, which is a natural incentive for them to do it. And then obviously, if it can help the student too, and they can more personalize their questions, and there's healthy reporting and safeguards going back and forth, right? We just started talking about this only a few months ago. And when I tell our team, like, hey, why aren't we having more school districts using it? They're like, it's us. Like we're pushing people away right now. People are actually very eager to use Khanmigo.
Yeah, and the thing I've heard, I've spoken to teachers. I've written sporadically about this since I think 2019. My first article, I did an article for the Times. Um, the teachers are eager, and I've spoken to teachers that use Khan Academy because they can use it for free, and this leads to a question about the business model. But if you want a school system, a district to adopt it, it gets tied up in uh, budgeting and teachers unions and all these different things that make it very complicated. Um, Khan Academy has been successful in penetrating that market because it's free and the teachers can grab it directly. But what's the business model? I mean, how can you keep developing and keep it affordable?
Yeah, and it's well, it's getting more and more nuanced. I think historically you're absolutely right. Our mission is free world class education for anyone, anywhere. It's not free to produce Khan Academy, so we've had to raise. Our budget now is pushing $70 million a year. That's a lot of
Yeah.
money. It gives me some anxiety having to work with the team to raise that every year. But I remind folks that's the budget of a large high school in the United States, and we're reaching a fraction of humanity, and hopefully a large fraction eventually. But there's a few things we've realized over the last few years. If you rewind about 6 years ago, we had all these efficacy studies about how Khan Academy can help if students put even 30 to 60 minutes a week in. We had a lot of teachers, we call them grassroots teachers, who were just using it on their own, hundreds of thousands.
Mhm.
And then we would ask ourselves, well, why aren't districts using us systematically? Why don't they use us as like a core resource in what they
Right.
do? And so we started talking to leadership at school districts, and almost every conversation would start off with one of them saying, "Oh, first of all, thank you, my niece or nephew, or my son or daughter, or even myself going through graduate school. Khan Academy really helped in some way, shape, or form." And they would then say, "Oh, and we believe your efficacy studies. I mean, my niece, swears by it, etc." Um, but if you want us to use it systematically, you have to give us support, training, integration with our rostering systems, district level dashboards. And that was the first time in Khan Academy's journey, this was 5, 6 years ago, where we said, wow, that's a lot of boots on the ground, so to speak. That's a lot of
Yeah,
enterprise level. But if we're really serious about moving the dial, especially for the kids who need it the most, we should do those things. But at the same time, those things are also very expensive on an incremental basis to go
sure.
send someone there to do the training and look at the IT systems. So we told the school districts, we're like, look, our whole goal is to just improve education generally, support you, but we're going to have to charge you for that. So we created what we call our district offering. It's $10 per student per year for all of that bespoke support and dashboards for the district to use it well. You fast forward to this past year, and we launched Khanmigo. Khanmigo adds another element to it, which is the computation costs of especially frontier models like
Yeah,
GPT-4, generative AI. It's very expensive. Initially, our estimates were looking something like $10 or $15 per user per month just for the computation. There's a reason why ChatGPT Pro is $20. That's the one that uses GPT-4. It's $20 a
yeah,
month. Um, and so coming out of the gate, we just were very ultra transparent with school districts. We're like, we're building this thing. We believe the cost is going to come down, but if you want to use this right now, we just want to cover the checks that we have to write to OpenAI, which is writing them to Microsoft, which is essentially writing them to NVIDIA. And
mm,
so we already have about 50,000 districts, 50,000 users in districts, not 50,000 districts, 50,000 students and teachers already this school year using Khanmigo in that district setting where the district is resourcing it in this way. And there's even the state of Indiana has actually is doing a pretty big project with a bunch of folks using Khanmigo and Khan for districts. The good news is we think we're going to be able to bring down that dramatically. I think by the end of this year, it's going to be the computation costs are going to be on the order of $10 or $15 per
mm,
year. We've been doing a lot of efficiencies on our end on how we use that computation. And then there is a pretty heavy support and training, especially with generative AI. You want to almost have a white glove service for the teachers and for the
yeah,
administrators. So that's probably also just the cost of that is probably another, let's call it $10 per user per year type of thing. I mean, it's mostly focused on the teachers and the administrators though. And but I think it's going to get us to a place where in places like the United States, this will be, I think, much more affordable in the $20 to $30 per year range, maybe a little bit more. And there's something also interesting where if you go into the developing world, especially the developing world that's on the other side of the planet, and we have a dedicated instance of GPT-4, it's not being utilized that much at 3 in the morning, California
yeah,
time.
yeah,
That could be really interesting to utilize that and offer it at a much, much more accessible rate. As I was saying, we're a nonprofit and our mission says free. We're just trying to make it as accessible as possible. So think about what we can do in India or the Philippines or places like that, which we're already thinking about.
yeah. On where it's going, I'm sorry I didn't play around with Kanamigo before the call, but I will. The this system that I described and then that Kanamigo is building toward recently, uh, again with generative AI, uh, real-time avatars have made a huge leap, and I always thought that that was the missing piece in AI tutors because it's one thing for and I've visited schools that are using different kinds of technology, and you have these kids like slumped in their chair and they're tapping on the keyboard and looking at their phone and paying attention to their friends. But if you had a face of someone that's reacting to you and talking to you as opposed to just lines of text streaming across the screen, I think it would be a lot more engaging. Have you thought about that?
Yes, and I have no doubt that that's going to come. I don't think it's going to come immediately. I think we're probably looking at probably the 3-year time frame for that to become really well done, well implemented. And I don't think that's actually a substitute. I think that's just going to be part of the mix. Uh,
Right, right.
as we know, kids, even with real human beings, sometimes chat is their is their optimal mode. There's sometimes it feels like a lower threshold, easier to ask questions, but we're already working on being able to have voice conversations. And yes, I think it's you in the not too far future, you're going to be able to have a video conference with your AI tutor and see its emotions, and it will be able to see your emotions too. Um,
Yeah, that's right.
which will be pretty powerful.
Yeah. So the the adding generative AI capabilities is kind of where you are, and Khanmigo is the focus right now, or where is the company building?
Yeah, it's all of the above. We're our core, our vision. We free world class education for anyone, anywhere. We've always said that means we want to have all the core academic material from pre-K through the core of college available in all of the world's major languages to be usable in a self-paced mastery way. Exercises, videos, articles, teacher tools, and now generative AI tutors and teaching assistants. So we're continuing to develop our core content. We are continuing to build out teacher and district tools. But yes, generative AI is definitely an ever increasing area of focus for us.
Yeah. Do you partner with different schools or with different uh, sort of MOOCs, like platforms like edX or Coursera? I talk to Andrew periodically about this. Or is your content, you're building your content yourself?
Our content, we've historically just we've done that in house, but we're definitely talking and working with all of the major AI providers, folks
Mm.
like OpenAI and Google and others, to just make sure that we have access to the state of the art and then figure out how to apply it um, in thoughtful ways.
Yeah. The again, the promise of this is not only as a teacher's aid, but I'm a lifelong learner, and I've actually I haven't followed through, but because I never took calculus in school, and I've taken some of the online AI courses, and so I've looked at Khan Academy and thought, I need to like go back and do all of these building block courses. Uh, do you have uh, people? Do you see parents, for example, not only in the United States, but as you were saying, around the world, who don't have access to quality education, giving this to their kids, and saying, here you can get the best education in the world if you have a smartphone and an internet connection. Do you see that happening?
Yes, and that's our whole reason for being, and it's not happening everywhere, which we would love to see happening, but for sure, and we're seeing it on all fronts. We're seeing teachers, parents putting their students in front of Khan Academy and making sure they use it. A lot of students, especially older students, are starting to use it on their own. And we see a lot of parents and teachers use it to even prepare themselves, to learn things that they wish they had learned better, either for something they now need in work or interests, or they want to support their students better. So we're seeing all of the above.
Yeah. My wife and I did as I said, she's an education consultant. She had a contract with the British Council to do a big study in Iraq, at which it's really continues to be a tragic situation there, particularly in education, because they have so few resources. But this is the sort of thing uh, that could be a game changer if it got penetration. So, but one of the challenges is the level of English in a lot of these markets isn't high enough to engage with educational content in English. Do you have uh, different language, the content offered in different languages?
Yeah, Khan Academy already exists in 50 plus languages to different degrees of fidelity. For example, in Spanish or Brazilian Portuguese or Hindi, it's almost as good as it is in English. And generative AI adds an interesting dimension to this. So most the way we've historically been able to localize is we have thousands of volunteers all over the world, and even corporate partners, others that are driving a lot of this work to make that possible. And we build the tools to let them do this. I think generative AI is going to help localize that. I think we'll always want a human reviewer at the end of the day or to
Yeah,
tweak it, but it'll be able to get it out into more languages quicker. But I think the other really interesting dimension in most of the world, especially when you get into late high school and early college, it's really valuable for students to be able to engage in their academics in English,
yeah,
because that is the lingua franca, so to
that's right.
speak, especially of academia. And so, what's interesting about Khanmigo, and this is relevant even I think to the United States, is if a student is still comfortable only in their native language, in Spanish and Arabic, whatever it is, but they're trying to now navigate English, it's very hard historically to do that. But with generative AI, Khanmigo can you can look at a problem or a video in English and ask questions in Hindi.
Mm,
Even in hybrid, in Spanglish, it can talk to, which is actually common for people who are making the crossover between two cultures or two languages. So yeah, I think this is going to go. It's like, I mean, imagine if every student who, I mean, even the United States, imagine every Spanish speaking student inside the United States had a one-on-one bilingual tutor who is also expert in whatever subject they're trying to learn there to tutor them.
yeah,
That's essentially what we're talking about.
yeah. Does it kind of drive you crazy that people aren't doing that, or that more people aren't doing that? Again, I have a the son of a friend of ours who's with, I think, Teach America, or one of these organizations, and he's in an underprivileged school in Nevada, uh, and it's a very frustrating environment for him. And I say, well, what, have you used any of these tools? And he kind of rolls his eyes. It's hard enough to get these kids to show up or pay attention, let alone have them engage with a piece of software. But what do you think needs to happen for that to click, and really because that, to me, that's the promise. Not It's not, uh, the upper middle class. I mean, certainly they'll benefit, but it's the the underprivileged class that really needs education, and this seems like it would be the answer.
Yeah, even before we talk generative AI, it always surprised me, as many people are using Khan Academy, know about it, how many people didn't. And this requires, we're happy to partner with politicians and let them take all the credit for it. We don't care. Like, just tell people it exists
Yeah,
and make sure. What's interesting is in a lot of parts of the world, it's interesting, especially in poorer parts of the world, including in poorer parts of the United States, people are skeptical of things that are free.
that's
They
right.
think there must be a catch. And that's the irony here, because affluent families, they have high usage of Khan Academy. They know that it's better than what
Yeah,
they could pay for. And then you have poor families that don't fully appreciate that. So we need to, and obviously we're working with anyone who we can to build that awareness. Obviously school districts are one way, but I think we could do more to work with the school districts to build more awareness with parents. I think many parents, if they knew that, look, get your child on this 2 or 3 sessions a week at 10-15 minutes, and good things are going to happen to them, a lot of parents will at least attempt to do that. And generative AI is still early days, and it's the costs are still a little bit high for everyone. But I'm hopeful that in the next year or two, the costs are going to come down dramatically, and the richness of the experience is so dramatic that you're going to see a lot more pull.
yeah. And just again, because I haven't played around with Khanmigo, it's interactive, and does it cover? Is it like an interface for all of your content, or is it only applied to specific domains?
Khanmigo applies to all of our content and more. I sound like an infomercial. It's a it's an add-on. So that's why we have to charge for that aspect of it, because
Sure.
it costs money to. I mean, it costs everything money to run, but even marginally, it costs us money to run. But it does everything from whatever topic you're in, whether you're doing a video article exercise. It can act as a Socratic tutor. It's not going to give you the answer, but it will ask leading questions, provide support, hints, connections. It'll do the same thing for teachers, helping them do lesson plans and things like that. But it also does things that even traditional tutors wouldn't do. It has an activity where you can talk to simulations of historical characters or literary characters.
Mhm.
We have a new feedback tool, essay feedback tool. It's not going to write your essay, but it's like a ethical writing coach where it's going to highlight parts of your passage and start threads with you about how you might be able to improve those things. We have activities where it acts as a thoughtful guidance counselor or even life coach, career coach. And we're adding new things almost on a daily basis. But it's almost broader than just a tutor or a teaching assistant.
Yeah. Yeah. At what age do you recommend students start interacting with Khanmigo or Khan Academy more broadly?
So Khan Academy starts pretty young. We actually have an app called Khan Academy Kids. If anyone in anyone's life is between ages 2 and 7 years old, I encourage them to think, I'm not selling anything. It is free. It is funded by philanthropy. And I think people are shocked when they see that app, what is in it, because it's literally equivalent to about 200 apps. There's actually 150 books in it. It's interactive videos, somewhat magical. Imagine watching a children's video where you can pause and then manipulate the things in the video. That's possible on Khan Academy Kids, and it's across all subjects: math, reading, writing, character development, like all of the above. So that's Khan Academy Kids, and already approaching 2 million students every month are using it. So it's already a large chunk of all kids in that demographic are using it. Once that one is not using generative AI. Then once you start getting into second, third grade, that's where you start seeing people use more, I guess you could say, the website or the core Khan Academy app. But we've seen students as young as second or third grade use Khanmigo pretty effectively. And what we have found, a lot of teachers and parents have been telling us, it's helping them articulate better what they're asking for, because
Yeah.
they get practice asking as much as they want. And so that's something I didn't fully appreciate before I actually saw very young kids use it.
Yeah, no, that's right. The paradigm of one teacher in front of a classroom of 30 people, a lot of kids are don't want to ask a question because they're afraid of appearing, ignorant in front of their peers. But if you can ask it through a software interface, it frees them from that kind of pressure. Um, so there's kind of a blowback against AI, which I think is very unfortunate, um, and that's spread to the general public. I hear, I talk to friends. I'm, all in on everything AI, and their attitudes are by and large very negative. Uh, how do you overcome that, or do you run into that, particularly with generative AI? All of the fears about, oh, students aren't going to learn to write anymore. They'll just have ChatGPT write their papers for them. I mean, personally, I think they've got to learn how to use these things. These are tools, they're not supplements for creativity. But how do you address that?
Yeah, I think people are. I think people have the right to be skeptical. They've all seen the science fiction movies, and yeah, right now the major use cases are around things like cheating. Eh, I think it's a job for folks like us to show there's another way that not only mitigates or undermines cheating, even pre-AI cheating, but actually can provide a much richer environment for people to actually develop those skills. So on something like writing, what we are working on, I just mentioned how Khanmigo already can give you feedback on your essay. Within a year, a teacher is going to be able to assign, say, an essay through Khanmigo. Khanmigo can work on the essay with the student, not do it for them, but give them feedback like an ethical writing coach. And then when the student feels good about the essay and they submit to the teacher, Khanmigo can give the teacher not just the final output of the essay and perhaps even a first pass of based on the rubric what the student should get on it, but it can make the entire process of the essay transparent to the teacher. Hey, we worked on this together for about 4 hours. I helped Craig a little bit with getting a thesis statement. After that, he did this, and he had one source that I didn't think was legitimate, and so we worked on that together. It took about 4 hours, and by the way, this is what I think this is how he performed on the rubric. And this writing is actually very consistent with the writing that I've seen Craig do in the classroom. So I feel confident that it's his. Now, if Craig goes off to ChatGPT, and this isn't a ChatGPT issue, there's plenty of websites that for the last 20 years, anyone can do a web search right now, and they'll write your essays for you for about
Right.
$5 a page. This is well before AI.
Yeah.
Let's say you use one of those, or your older sister wrote your essay, or you use ChatGPT and you just copy and paste it into Khanmigo. Khanmigo is going to tell the teacher, like, we didn't work on this essay. It just showed up. It looks shady. And by the way, it's not consistent with what they're doing in class. So what I've described is on the policing side of things, something that actually undermines all forms of cheating that existed before, not even just generative AI cheating.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's doing it in a way that actually supports the student better. It's giving
Yeah.
them more feedback. They're feeling supported. And then the teacher has a much better lens into what's going on with that student. How much time are they spending? What are they having struggles with? And they can get that even summarily reported across all the issues. Like all of your students, or a lot of them, are having trouble with thesis statements. And
Yeah.
here's examples of how I've had to help them there. Let's really drill down on that in the classroom.
Yeah. Yeah. Why don't I let you? Is there a message that you want to bring to the world, or at least to my audience, uh, with Khan Academy?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of interesting things to think about. I mean, one, if we just think about AI very, very, very broadly, I do have broad concerns. Most of my biggest concerns are well outside of the field of education. I worry about a totalitarian government that
Yeah.
already can tap phone lines and snoop emails, but there's too much information for them to make sense of. Now with generative AI, they're actually going to be able to make sense of every conversation. They could put microphones on the street, and if anyone even whispers that they have some sense of dissent, they might get rounded up. I'm very afraid of that. Now, I think there's ways that the good folks can actually undermine that, potentially also using generative AI. I'm happy to talk about that, but I'm afraid of that. Big brother in that world could be much bigger of a brother than anything George Orwell imagined. So that's
Yeah.
scary. I'm afraid of criminal organizations, misinformation, phishing attacks, also third party external governments doing misinformation, manipulating sentiment in this country, political elections, etc. That's all very scary. Um, but once again, I think there's ways to police that. And I think on the positive side, it's going to really level the playing field and then some for things like education. It's going to help teachers. It's going to give even things like, you know, I know this sounds almost too, I right now when people, there's a loneliness crisis in the United States. There is a mental health crisis in the
Yeah.
United States. And I'm not going to pretend that you can use an AI to substitute what a good community could do. Honestly, even today, I think people substitute things like therapy for what a good community could do. Uh,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and therapy, I think, can also be very valuable. But that's also extremely hard to reach. And when someone's in a dark moment or having an issue, they usually don't have someone to talk to right at that moment. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 5-10 years, you're going to see research studies where it's like, wow, this is actually helping people with their
Yeah.
mental health. It's helping people deal with stress. It's helping people become more mindful about themselves, that they are forming bonds. And some people might say it's an artificial bond, but at the end of the day, if it can help people live their lives better, I think this could be a very positive thing.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So, how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/ionai. That's oracle.com/ionai. That's it for this episode. I want to thank Sal for his time. If you want to read a transcript of today's conversation, you can find one on our website, ionai. That's EYE-ON.ai. In the meantime, remember, the singularity may not be near, but AI is already changing your world. So pay attention.